Chasing a Name Lost to Time is the title of an article in the July 2nd, 2011 edition of the New York Times. The article was written by Joseph Berger. Benjamin P. Feldman, a retired real estate investor with the time and the money to chase his enthusiasms, was rummaging through a bin at a flea market in Chelsea last winter when he came across a weathered leather change purse with the words engraved in gold, "Compliments of Sol Goldberg's Cafe, 71 Canal Street, Tele 2111 Orchard." There was something about the antique purse and its desperate gambit to lure customers that spoke to him. "I need to know this guy," Mr. Feldman said. "I sense a very sad story, and I want to know what happened to this poor guy." His sleuthing about someone who was neither a friend nor a relative had absolutely no practical purpose. Solving the tantalizing mystery simply became a compulsion for Mr. Feldman, who once researched another obscure person based on a 19th century expense ledger. "It's valuable to raise a person's story from the dead, that people shouldn't be forgotten," he said. "In every grave lies a wonderful story." Asked why certain names lost to history obsess him, he compared it to falling in love, where there's no rhyme or reason to it, but you know it when it happens. The first gumshoe step he took after discovering the purse was to head downtown to 71 Canal Street near Allen Street. The building was still there, though a Chinese restaurant operated where the cafe had probably been. The unusual telephone number dated from before the two letters of the telephone exchange began to precede the number. Mr. Feldman deduced that the cafe had opened before the 1920s. After checking Tro's directories at the New York Historical Society, he found a listing not only for the cafe, but also for the Eagle Non-Intoxicating Wine Company, which was run, he learned, by Sol Goldberg and his son Herbert. Mr. Feldman tells how, using ancestry websites and census records, he learned that Sol Goldberg had immigrated as a teenager from Russia in 1892, living first in Virginia before settling with his parents at 149 Ludlow Street on the Lower East Side. He married a woman named Rosa Friedlander. By 1902, he was operating a saloon at 17 Ludlow Street and living above the store in 4 rooms in a building that today is populated by Chinese immigrants. The rent for the saloon and the room was $75. In owning a tavern, Sol followed a well-trod path because Jews, barred from many occupations in Eastern Europe, were allowed to undertake work that might be seen as sinful for Christians. By 1908, Sol was selling liquor at 71 Canal Street, the address on the purse, and moved to a series of progressively nicer tenements along East Broadway. He and Rosa had 3 children, Herbert, George Milton, and Helen. Soon the family members left the teeming Lower East Side for the wide open spaces of Brooklyn, first in Brownsville, then Flatbush, where they bought an attached house on Martin Court. Sol's luck ran out with the dawn of Prohibition, eventually forcing him to close the cafe. On October 17, 1920, he was arrested for selling a drink to one Isidore Einstein. Federal archives of the Volstead Act's enforcement show he paid a $250 fine. The decade afterward is veiled in mist, but Mr. Feldman confirmed with descendants that, to no surprise, Sol got involved in bootlegging. He learned that from R. Allen Gardner of Reno, Nevada, a grandson who, even with the name change, he tracked down in April with a day's assistance from a genealogist. Mr. Gardner, 81, is a retired professor of comparatively psychology who gained fame for teaching American Sign Language to a chimpanzee. He told Mr. Feldman by telephone that as a baby his parents, George Milton and May Goldberg, would take him cruising by car around Brooklyn. The trunk was filled with cases of liquor, but the police would never suspect a young couple with a baby. It was Sol who dealt with the wholesalers. "Perhaps you heard of my late brother, Herb?" Mr. Gardner asked. "He was a playwright, kind of well known. He'd written Conversations with My Father with Judge Hirsch as Eddie, the keeper of the steady, seedy bar on Canal Street. In fact, he soon learned Sol, the father of the Gardner brothers, owned the Silvergate Bar and Grill at 251 Canal, after Prohibition was repealed. It endured until 1945, 2 years after Sol died of cardiac failure. Sol's will suggested he died relatively poor, leaving his family less than $5,000. I felt I'd come to the end of the line in this whole business of raising the dead. I felt like I'd finished the job. As a coda to his quest, Mr. Feldman visited the Beth David Cemetery in Elmont, New York.